just to say that I'm not in Melbourne, and I'm joining the conference from Lutruwita, Tasmania. So what I want to do in this paper is explore some of the thinking behind my exhibition, Dream Factory, GMH Design at Fisherman's Bend, 1964 to 2020, which was held at the City Gallery in Melbourne from 2021 to February this year. It went on for so long because of COVID, they couldn't take it down. Anyway, and the exhibition was based on a selection of drawings held at the RMIT Design Archives, where I was director for many years. And the aim of Dream Factory was not only to discover new ways of working with archival material, but also new ways of exhibiting cars. Next. So in the last 2 or 3 years, major exhibitions have been held on automobiles in some of the world's most prestigious art museums. They kicked off with the V&A's blockbuster Cars Accelerating the Modern World that ran from November 2019 to April 2020 in London. And the blurb said, over its short 130-year history, the car's become one of the most loved, contested, and influential innovations in the world. It's revolutionized manufacturing, transformed how we move, forever changing our cities, environments, and economies. And in fact, their exhibition, as you can see here, vast and thorough, as V&A exhibitions always are, was divided into 3 themes which cover off those themes that they talked about. So this one here is called Going Fast, and it relates obviously to speed and to crashes, with that Patricia Piccinini figure of a crash victim in the middle. Next.
Is that also on a Memphis plinth? Looks like it.
I don't know. You can tell me that, Simon, but it's.
I
should have looked at. His name's Gordon, I think.
Yeah. It just looks like something from George Soden or Sotz's that.
Oh yeah,
he's sitting on. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that blue one. Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. The next section was Making More, which is basically about reproduction, the technologies of reproduction. And next, Shaping Space, which was about the impact of the motor car on our environment. So a year after the V&A closed, Automania opened at MoMA in New York and ran from July 2021 to January this year. And it too took a large view, and this is a quote. Since the first automobiles hit the road over a century ago, cars have left a lasting imprint on the design of our built environment. For both better and worse, they've fundamentally reshaped the ways in which we live, work, and enjoy ourselves. Cars have altered our ideas about mobility, connecting us across great distances at ever greater speeds. Automania takes an in-depth look at the object that's inspired countless examples of innovation, social transformation, and critical debate about designers and artists working in varied media. Next. And a few months after MoMA closed, Norman Foster curated this exhibition, which closes today, Motion, Autos, Art, Architecture, which opened at the Guggenheim Bilbao, Spain in April. And it featured a lot of Foster's own car collection, which is probably why he decided to curate it. And given he's an architect, its thematic combining of these two design objects comes as no surprise. And next slide. And according to the blurb for this exhibition, it celebrates the artistry of the automobile realm, sewn into the parallel worlds of painting, sculpture, architecture, photography, and film. Taking a holistic approach, the exhibition challenges the separate silos of these disciplines and explores how they're visually and culturally linked. The exhibition considers the affinities between technology and art, showing, for example, how the use of the wind tunnel helped to aerodynamically shape the automobile to go faster with more economic use of power. And I think these three exhibitions really refer back to the sort of research that Chris Lizotte outlined in her paper today about the social and cultural impact of the automobile. And there's been a lot of research on this aspect of the car. Next. These exhibitions, however, were preceded by the National Gallery of Victoria's 2015 exhibition, Shifting Gear, Design, Innovation and the Australian Car. As its title indicates, the exhibition was about the cars themselves. They were presented in an art museum and treated as works of art, not, as in the case of the other three exhibitions, works of social and cultural history. There were 23 cars, 5 engines, and almost no other documentation. And it was interesting, when we published the book, the then director of the V&A was in Melbourne and he took the catalogue away with him, but obviously the V&A decided to go down their own route when they did their exhibition. Next, please. So I worked as a curator, I worked closely with exhibition designer Peter King, who I have to say, I think did the best exhibition design of any of the ones that I'm talking about. And whose treatment of each car emphasised their status as a designed object, both in the way they were displayed individually and in his use of a strong graphic, which highlighted their design features and also connected each of the rooms to each other. And next, so you can see this in some of the displays where he enhanced the, where possible, the drawings we had of the cars. Next. Or in the case of the Maybach, what he did was to digitally enhance a cover of an American book which had the Maybach on the cover. Next. Or the Holden Hurricane, what we did here was to print a digital version of the brochure, a page in the Hurricane brochure. And next, this gorgeous room where Peter mounted the Bolwell Nagari on a table to show it off like an art object and surrounded it with digital imagery of car design, sometimes taken from studios with people actually styling cars or from design drawings. And when I first discussed the exhibition with GMH, in fact with Richard Falazzo and Michael Simcoe, and this was in late 2013, early 2014, and what I really wanted to do in this particular room was to install a sort of a condensed version of a design studio showing how cars are actually styled. And we sort of got very enthusiastic about this and talked about it for quite a while, but in the end the costing was just prohibitive. We couldn't do it. So what we have here is a very faint echo of that idea of the studio. Okay, next please. So that brings me to Dream Factory. And as I said before, this exhibition opened at City Gallery in the middle of 2021 and closed in February this year. It was, compared with all the others, a tiny exhibition, or actually compared with any exhibition, it's a tiny exhibition because the gallery is really very small. It's tucked into the Melbourne Town Hall. But in retrospect, I can see that it shares an approach with Shifting Gear and can be seen in the sense to continue that exhibition, but looking back beyond the vehicle into something of the conditions within which they were conceived. And it sort of seems obvious when I look at it now, but it was only really putting this together that you see all the themes that keep on sort of moving around in your head and don't really change. Okay, next one. So this is the title panel that you saw when you came into the exhibition facing you. And as its name suggests, Dream Factory, the exhibition celebrated the automotive design, the automotive design studio at Fisherman's Bend. I just lost my place there. Yes, so it celebrates the studio of General Motors Holden at Fisherman's Bend, which was housed in the Technical Centre. Next slide, thanks.
Yes.
In 1964, so that's a panel you saw on the left-hand side as you came into the room. In 1964, the GMH Technical Centre, designed by Stevenson and Turner, a prominent Melbourne architectural firm, opened at its Fisherman's Bend site, the company's headquarters since 1936. Although a modest building, scarcely known outside the world of GMH for 60 years, the Technical Centre was the powerhouse of one of the most successful industrial design studios in Australia, and I guess it's that aspect of the studio that really interests me. Whereas the engineering and styling studios have been left pretty much alone by Detroit in the previous decades, when Bill Mitchell succeeded Harley Earl in 1959, things changed. In 1963, Mitchell chose Detroit-born Joe Szymanski to take up the newly created position of design director at Fisherman's Bend, just before the opening of the Technical Centre. And in 1965, just after the opening, John Chanella, a graduate of New England School of Art in Boston, was sent to Melbourne for a 6-month stint in the design studio. He stayed for 5 years as its head. After Szymanski retired in 1975, Californian Leo Pernot took his place and led the team until 1983, when Melbourne-born Philip Smood replaced him. Thus, for the first 20-odd years, the Technical Centre was a tight Australian-American collaboration, and this set the tone for, sorry, I'm having a terrible time here, for the subsequent history of the studio, and we've already heard about that from John and others. When I conceived of the exhibition, the building was in a vulnerable position. The site, which is on the edge of the CBD in Melbourne, had been closed in 2020 and sold off when GMH finished manufacturing operations in Australia. The building was slated for demolition, and Norm, I don't know if it's been demolished yet. It's not a great example of modernism or a modernist building, but I'd hope by constructing a strong argument about its cultural and heritage significance, it might be saved. So my approach really had an architectural and heritage sort of foundation to it.
It's still there, Harriet. So.
Yep.
Yep, still there.
Yep, next slide. The opening of the Technical Centre coincided with the opening of the Opel Technical Centre in Germany, a decade after GM's huge technical centre designed by Eero Saarinen opened at Warren, Michigan. And the three of them were together, a distributed design facility where gifted designers circulated as they made their careers, at least Australian designers did. They were completely globalised, as much as home in Detroit as they were here. Next. Uniquely in the context of art museum auto exhibitions, this exhibition focused on drawings, which had been donated to the RMIT Design Archives by General Motors Holden and individual designers like Philip Smood. As mentioned above, when I curated Shifting Gear in 2015, I had an idea of recreating a design studio to show the various stages of auto styling. This was not to be, but I can see that I carried this idea around with me for years because it came out in another way in this exhibition. There is, you can see on the right-hand image there in the exhibition, an elaborately staged photograph of the GMH design studios taken in the 70s, where they sort of collapsed all of the different activities into one photograph. And below that, which you can't see, it looks like a very dark sort of image, was Peter Nankervis's fantastic mural that he painted in the studio wall for the opening of the facility in 1964. It's like this great utopian fantasy. So next slide, thanks. The focus of the exhibition was on the agents of the design studio, the designers. 9 panels across 2 walls display 9 designers in chronological order from 1960s to the 2000s. This approach is, as far as I know, unique in an auto exhibition, but similar to how an architectural exhibition would be arranged. And by trade, I'm actually an architectural historian. Brief biographies were included of each designer and the major car models they're involved with. And John Field will know about this because I pestered him about it all. At first, I wanted to simulate a design studio environment by pinning the original drawings to the wall in some fashion that didn't damage them, but this wasn't allowed, needless to say, by our collections manager. So Stephen Banham, who designed the exhibition, had the drawings copied to scale on archival paper, and they were then pinned to the panels in a more or less informal manner. Next, thanks. The selection of drawings and the commentary on them, and I had a lot of wall text, which is a no-no really in exhibitions, but I always insist on a lot of wall text because it never seems to me that the audience really has got no other way of really understanding what's going on and what's happening in the curator's head. So the selection of drawings and the commentary on them was arrived at in conversation with the designers themselves. I put together illustrations of the drawings in the Design Archives collection that I wanted to use and sent them out to each designer, asking them to confirm the model, the date, and to tell me something about the car and the styling. From these comments, I selected the drawings in the exhibition. The collection of responses provided a unique insight into the design ethos at GMH. And two major themes emerged, which interested me because they reflect my experience of design research more generally at RMIT. And these were the ideas of a community of practice and the idea of the collaborative design studio, both of which all the designers I spoke to are very articulate about. And I included some of their comments as quotations on the panels as a way of including their voices in the exhibition, which would thus not be dominated by one curatorial voice. The focus on the designers, next slide, thanks, outlines the close relationship between this studio in Melbourne and Detroit. For example, drawings by John Chanella document his work on the iconic HK Monaro, among other models, and their panels illustrating the work of Andrew Smith and Michael Simcoe, both of whom were directors of the GMH Design Studio. But the panel also reminds the viewer that Smith is now Executive Director of Global Cadillac and Buick Design, and Michael Simcoe, as we've already heard a couple of times today, is now Vice President of GM Global Design, occupying Harley Earl's office at Warren, Michigan. Next slide. As a curator, I was able to commission artworks. So we commissioned Lawrence Johnson to produce a film on the history of Holden, which is embedded in that final panel. And I also commissioned emerging ceramic artist Jia Chen to produce a ceramic work, which he did called Dream My Monaro. And she was inspired to do this because she had a friend, Huan Yang, who worked at GMH. And Jia was very interested in the relationship between her ceramic practice and the clay model that that Wan and others had worked on in the GMH studio. And next slide, we produced a small catalogue as a record of the exhibition. And final slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harriet. Yeah, fascinating. Note that John was up on the wall there as well, pinned up like he would have been in the studio, looking at some of his concepts.
Yeah, John was great. He was so helpful.
There's a general probably consensus on John. So is there any comments from the floor? Paul Beringer.
Hi, Harriet. I'm just asking, where is that exhibition now?
Nowhere. It's all been taken down, and it's yeah, it was
dismantled.
It was all digitally devised, and it you know, just doesn't exist anymore.
Okay, so the hard materials have been destroyed.
Well, they're everything.
Probably in the archives, right?
Yeah, they're in the archives. They all belong. Everything belongs to the archive.
They're over there. Yeah, they'll be over in RMIT Design Archives next to the Design Hub.
Yeah.
Yeah. What
And
about
the
the ceramic
artwork-
work? Where's that? That's
I
amazing.
know the artworks are in the Melbourne City Council collection.
Yeah.
And what
great.
was really good is that we showed the scale model of the Holden Hurricane.
Yeah, saw that.
It's a gorgeous little model. And during the organisation of the exhibition, that model was acquired by the National Gallery of Victoria. So it's in their collection.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Right.
That was a real, coup.
So who was the custodian of that?
GMH.
GMH. Cool.
Yeah.
Great. That's another Tony Elwood masterstroke. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was. Tony and David Hurlston, who I worked with
Right.
on the shifting gear. He was the one who did all the negotiations for getting that model into the gallery.
Great. Other questions, comments? John, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, just a comment. Harriet mentioned I didn't just help a small way to put it together. That's a privilege. It's also a lot of being part of the exhibition.
Yep.
So we're by that. But that booklet that Harriet put the team prepared, that itself is a really important historical document. It's really nice to put together. It's quite some images in it. I squirreled a handful away to myself, picture safekeeping, but yeah, hopefully that's something that can still be shared around or saved somewhere for future reference.
Well, yeah, I think it shows the power of qualitative research, right? We're basically describing multivocal inscription. So the voice of the participant is driving validity, credibility, and a real power to what you've done there, Harriet, with all of those participants in what you've presented at that exhibition and in the documentation that follows. So,
yeah, no, it was important that I did that. It's sort of, and I think I learned that from shifting gear because it's so outside my realm of expertise. I could only do that because all these people helped me. People like Norm, and so it was really listening to those voices that allowed these exhibitions to go ahead. So that was really important for me.
Yeah. It's always more fun qualitative research. Coming from a straight engineer. We've got a couple of comments. Janet Bolito said, appreciate the wall text, and Alison Wayne said, I love the ceramic Monaro. So cool.
Good. I'll tell you about that.
I feel a bit like Q&A, reading out the tweets.
Yeah.
So take it as a comment. Take those as a comment. If there are no other questions or comments amongst people online or in the room, we might all join together in a round of applause for